worldwide sound. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of Talktainmentradio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Alrighty. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, all around the world. Welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go on the world's greatest radio, and you are in touch with the Compensatory Concept. I'm your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is radio, the way it should be heard. In a few moments, I'm going to give you a number that you can call to get in contact with the show. And I will also give you a Gmail address, which you can Gmail me, and we can get your concerns on the air so that Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., the author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, can answer your or address your questions. Mr. Fuller is on the line live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Fuller, good morning, and how are you this morning? We got him on there? Mr. Fuller? Don't have him in my ear. Okay. Let's see here. What we'll try to do, a little technical difficulties because the line is lit. Let me try it again. Mr. Fuller, can you hear me? Not yet. Okay, whoops. Okay, can we try it again? Okay, wait, we're going to hold it. Okay, that is what goes on with live radio. Mr. Fuller, are you there? Okay. I'll tell you what I'm going to do until we make contact. We'll get the technical people on it. But I'm going to read you what some people are saying. First of all, we want to thank Mr. Brown. I'm not going to read his last name. He wrote a little bit in cursive, so I'm going to try to read what he said. But he sent in his donation to the Compensatory Concept here, and we appreciate that, Mr. Fred. But he says in his comment, he said, I've been listening to and living by rigorously the words of Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and Dr. Francis Christ Welsing since the late 1980s. I have recently received my, a degree in broadcast communication. Very good. Congratulations. And I hope to be of service even if I have to volunteer. May God continue to bless this show, and thank you, and God bless you. Sincerely, I'm not going to mention his last name, Mr. Fred, but we thank you. Okay, Mr. Fuller, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I was just reading a letter. Someone, Mr. Fred, sent in his donation and wanted to thank you for the show. And let me read this one also. This one just blew me away. Let's see. His first name is Daryl, and this is what he said. He said, my phone is down right now, so I won't be able to call in, so just wanted to email his question to you. He said, first, though, I have a comment. Just wanted to let you all know that the show is blown up. I've seen the show posted on YouTube, and people are listening live into the podcast. I've asked people in chat rooms, in Facebook groups, if they know about the show, and they like it. Yeah, they say they listen all the time. So that's great news there. We're very glad about that. He says, Mr. Fuller, before I even asked you, but he did have a question. He said, now my question for Mr. Fuller is this. What would you tell black folk to be doing tonight instead of sitting around the tube watching Empire, a show that degrades the black image? I ask because if you put a camera in just about every black house or look at social media, I'd say about 85% of black folk will be watching it in depth and into it, then spend the next few days talking about it on and on and on. Thank you for your response. Thank you for the good show. Peace. D. Mr. Fuller, didn't mean to answer that question right off the bat, but since he had such lovely things said about your show and how it's just all over the social media, I personally haven't gone to YouTube to hear it, but he said it's all over there and it's blowing up. How would you respond to his question?
You can look at anything, fictional, non-fictional. Look at anything that's going on anywhere on the planet. You can look at it. I look at old movies. I look at a lot of things. I look at everything that's going on around me. Why? Because it's going on around me. And so you want to be aware of anything that's going on in the world, regardless of what it is. I mean, if the camera pans to a scene in Tibet, then you find out something that's going on in Tibet. It might be a number of sheep herders just going across a grassy area, and they're called people who reside in a place called Tibet at the top of the world. So you'll look at that, and then the camera will pan to somewhere where there's a bunch of black people hanging out in front of a liquor store and arguing with each other and fighting and whatnot. So you look at that. And then you look at something that is produced by a movie studio that's supposed to be presented and drawing a lot of attention to people, and people are giving it their attention, so you look at that. But you always look at it with the intent of picking out immediately, is this of constructive value or is this of non-constructive value? It's going to be one or the other. And if it's of constructive value, how is it constructive? What can I learn from what I'm looking at that's going to have a constructive effect on how I think, speak, and act? And how is it going to have a constructive or a non-constructive effect on the thinking of other people, millions of people maybe, who may be looking at the same thing? Is it going to cause them to want to do something constructive, or is it going to cause them to want to do something non-constructive? There's no such thing as in between. Mm-hmm. Anything that you're looking at, anything that you learn, any time of the day, wherever you happen to be, everything going on around you is either going to have a constructive effect on the way that you think, speak, and act, or it's going to have a non-constructive effect on the way that you think, speak, and act. That's compensatory law.
All righty, compensatory law. Okay. Mr. Fuller is the author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, which is white supremacy. You can purchase your copy of this book by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com, and what will come up on the screen will be all the information that you need to get your copy of that book, and also a word guide. And someone asked a question, Mr. Fuller, about that word guide. Could you briefly just describe that, please?
Well, the word guide is basically it's similar to a dictionary, but it's not a dictionary. And it has a limited number of words in it. I would like to have maybe 2,000 or 3,000 more words in the word guide. It's a pretty thick book, but it has a substantial number of words in it, words that people use and words that you can kind of expect to hear maybe sometime or another, or words that you yourself will use. But its design is called a compensatory counter-racist codified word guide, meaning that you study words in such a way that when you use these words, they will have directly, indirectly, a counter-racist effect, or they will be supportive of racism. So if you hear any words that are supportive of racism, you want to be able to identify what they are. So it shows you mostly what words to look for, what words to listen for when people use them, and most importantly, what questions to ask when certain words are used.
Yes, sir.
Or how they are used, and what context. Context is very important. Like if a person is, I gave the illustration, I think, in one of the programs prior to this one, that when a person equates racism with Americanism, well, you want to be alert to that, because that causes what? Confusion. Racism has nothing to do with Americanism, or Asianism, or Africanism. Racism has to do with racism, which is white supremacy. That's a separate species altogether. It has nothing to do with America. It has nothing to do with Africa. It has nothing to do with Asia. The words, according to the counter-racist codified word guide, America, Africa, Asia, and these are compensatory definitions, suggestions. You don't have to use them, but you can use them. You say anybody who is an American or an African or an Asian is a person who practices justice. By definition, you're automatically a person that believes in practicing justice and who actually practices justice. You just can't believe in it because, you say you believe in something, you're supposed to be doing the thing that you say you believe in. So in order to qualify for being an Asian or an African or an American, you have to be a person that practices justice. Otherwise, what's the point in being any one of those three things? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can be anything and mistreat someone, because if you're going to mistreat someone, you're just a mistreater. You don't have to have some added label. And so, therefore, you should be singled out as a person that mistreats people. And if you're a person that mistreats people, you cannot be an African, you cannot be an American, and you cannot be an Asian. So white supremacy is about being a mistreater. So therefore, it's impossible for you to be an American or an African or an Asian and you mistreat anybody. That is absolutely impossible. And this is the way that, the word guide this is just an example,
yes, sir,
of the kind of things that the word guide leads you to thinking into and sticking with it and being able to substantiate your points when you talk to people. I mean, you can tell people that. You say, you can't be an American and mistreat someone. That's impossible. And the minute you mistreat someone, you have disowned that title. You have put that in the face of the entire world. I'm not an American, and I'm not an African, and I'm not an Asian. I'm a mistreater.
Mistreater. Okay. Hey, Galen, I'm going to take the station break now so I can go ahead to the calls. Let's see here. Let's do this. Talktainment Radio is a 24/7 no-charge worldwide broadcasting facility that have hosts delivering on various topics such as news, lifestyle, sports, health, wellness, religion, and, of course, politics. Now, here's one that I would like to share with you right now, and it's called The Voice of Pink Pearl Magazine. Host Lanetta, the voice of Pink Pearl, features women from all walks of life sharing their stories of personal triumph over adversity. The voice of Pink Pearl features guests covering topics from current affairs, health, beauty, fashion, and contemporary literature. Lanetta brings the vision to motivate, uplift, and empower all women. The Voice of Pink Pearl is broadcast on Fridays exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. That is radio the way it should be heard. And speaking of being heard, we'd like to hear from you for donations. And this is what we would like for you to do. to make your donations to K&E World Network. That is the letter K and then E, the letter E, World Network. Post Office Box 6184, Columbus, Ohio. That is 43206. And I will repeat that again later in the program. Now, we will accept a money order or a bank check, but no personal checks. We will also email you your receipt, and all donations are final. Now, the purpose is to extend the compensatory concept for and an additional hour, making it a 2-hour program. And our goal is to cover 1 year worth of programming. So we thank you for those who have made the contributions to that. They're beginning to come in. So we thank you. Now, I'm going to open up the phone lines, and you can do that now by calling 1-877-932-9766. Or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and I will do what I can to get to your question, although the questions will be in the question rotation. Okay, I have the line number 1 is up. Line number 1. You are the first caller on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller. What is your question?
Yes, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller, how are you this morning?
Good morning, sir.
I got a couple questions, but first of all, Mr. Fuller, you got strong young black people that men that herd sheep in Africa and all over the world too. I mean, all blacks aren't in front of a liquor store in Harlem drinking Wild Ivy Rose. Well, that sounds too much like a Richard Pryor joke. I mean, maybe we need to avoid that too, though. But I know that you kind of upset. We see a lot of this time after time, and maybe you thought you had to get that out there. Say, look, let me books on racism and these slave movies. They got another Unforgot something on TV I saw. I turned away real fast. We don't need after Roots, we didn't need no more slave movies. If you can't find a good job, if they don't want to pay you to be a real man, turn it down, do something else. We don't need no more of that. It's like black people like slave stuff. Now, one more, and before I hang up, look, books on racism. I was listening to another black station the other day, and a doctor, somebody from some university, come on. I know you've written a book too, Mr. Fuller, and there's about 5,000 people out there with 5,000 books on racism in America, white supremacy this, white supremacy that. Look, if you don't just give us any more questions on how to do this or that, give us the answers. We don't need somebody selling us a book. We need the answers. If you got a way to defeat it or come up with a system of justice or slow these people down or stop it, give it to us, black people. We just can't come up with books or different coming on a radio show and give an opinion with PhD ABC behind our name. We need answers. Okay? Thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. I'd like to hear your comments there.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Fuller?
Yeah, well, you have to start somewhere, I always say that all problems, first of all, you ascertain or you make a judgment about whether or not there are any problems. So the assumption is that the world is full of problems. So when you look around for the biggest problems, in my opinion, the biggest problem is racism in the form of white supremacy. Mm-hmm. So you first recognize that is the problem. People have to agree, what is the biggest problem on the planet? So I came to the conclusion many years ago, it took me quite a while to get around to it, that the biggest problem is this problem of what I finally discapsulized by saying white supremacy or racism, which racism and white supremacy are one and the same. That if you solve that problem, the other problems will be real easy to solve in all of the areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. But that's the first hurdle, is to get everybody on that same page if you possibly can. That's what I'm trying to do, to say that you can't solve any problem on this planet unless you solve the problem of racism. You might as well forget it. Trying to solve any problem between people. Now, you might be able to solve some scientific problems, that has to do with physical science. I mean, like curing a disease or something like that. But in connection with people, the white supremacists, if you come up with a cure for a disease, they immediately take command of that. And then they start spreading the disease and curing it based on their power and who they want to have the disease and who they don't want to have the disease. That's why I'm saying everything that people do is going to lead right into the white supremacist argument. And so, therefore, that should be the priority for every person on the planet. Solve this problem of racism and do that by producing a product to replace it called justice, which means what? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help.
Constructive help.
And so that's to capsulize it. And the gentleman is correct. We need focus. See what I mean? Get the focus on what the problem is first. And once we identify the problem, then everything that you do is supposed to lead to solving that problem. If it's not leading to solving that problem, then you're wasting your time and your energy, and that should be understood by everybody on the planet.
All righty. Good call, caller number one. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTeamRadio.com. That is radio the way it should be heard. And now we're going to go to line number three. Line number three, you are now up. What is your question?
Greetings, Brother Warren from New Orleans, and like to say greetings to you and Mr. Fuller. My question is, Mr. Fuller, you often say that in order to help eliminate the system of white supremacy, the victims of white supremacy shouldn't always go along with the deceptive games that are in place. For example, going after the buffer. So when you gave the reason why you voted for Mr. Obama, you said you wanted a black person, black young people to see that someone could be something other than trash on the street. And number two, you knew he wouldn't do anything. But if we continue to participate with the white supremacists' deceptive schemes, are we not contributing to the existence of white supremacy by knowing that we are participating with a game that's already set up? So in other words, if the code says one should not go after the buffer in terms of attack the buffer, does the code also say not support the buffer as well? And I'll listen.
Okay, Mr. Fuller, thank you for your call, caller. Mr. Fuller?
No, you have to start somewhere, and you have to start, and where is that somewhere? See, there's a question, and then there's an answer to everything in the universe. So if you have to start somewhere, where do you start? Well, logic says, and this is why I always say, follow the logic. Follow the logic. Logic came with universe. So if you're going to start to solve a problem, you are already a part of the problem that you are recognizing needs to be solved. Otherwise, the problem wouldn't exist if it didn't affect you. So therefore, you are a part of the problem that you're trying to solve, always. That's how the problem came to you in the first place. That's the connection between you and the problem. It had to be a connection. So therefore, if you are a part of the problem, you evolve out of that by solving the problem so that there's no problem for you to be a part of. But you have to start from where you are. Now, to keep from sounding like that's double talk, I'll give the illustration. We are born in a prison. Okay, a prison is what? It's made up of inmates, and it's made up of people who have authority over the inmates. That's what a prison is. That's the definition of a prison. You have people who are in the prison, and then you have people who run the prison, in simple terms. Now, by being in the prison, you are part of the prison system. Otherwise, there would be no prison. So you are supporting the prison just by being in the prison. So we are born in a prison called white supremacy. That's a world prison. And if you are a person of color, you are born in that prison. There's no way to escape that. So since the whole world is dominated by the white supremacists, if you are a person of color and you're in that prison that's dominated by the white supremacists, you have to work from where you are. So what you do, like the character, and I'll use this movie reference again, Shawshank Redemption, the character played by Tim Robbins,
Andy Dufresne,
was Andy Dufresne, and he found himself in a prison on a bogus charge, which is exactly where black people are all over this world. We're in prison on a bogus charge. What's that bogus charge? That we're supposed to be mistreated on account of our color. That's the bogus charge. The white supremacists say, you're the wrong color. You don't have any business on this planet, really, but since you're here, I'm supposed to mistreat you. That's my assignment. So they take that seriously, and they have pulled it off. Well, that's a bogus charge, and we're in that prison based on that bogus charge. So how do we deal with it since we're born in it? They already have the power. They're not trying to get the power. They are the prison masters, and we are born in the prison already. The walls up around us everywhere when we are born, and we become aware of this. So what you do, like Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption, you have to put up with the nonsense that goes with this.
Okay.
Okay? But you also spend all your time working toward doing what? Toward dismantling that prison.
Which is what he did.
Not just busting out,
but
dismantling it.
Yes.
Because if you remember the Shawshank Redemption, you can look at the movie. That's a fast way for you to learn what I'm talking about. Andy Dufresne did what? He not only got out of that prison, he eroded the prison.
Yes, he did.
Because he took down that Norton, who was the warden. I mean, and did it in such a skillful way, Norton destroyed himself. That's the prison master. He destroyed himself. He was a crooked prison master. And,
right.
And he was taking advantage of people who were the prisoners, naturally.
Yes.
You know?
And Andy Dufresne used his
he used what I call political jujitsu.
Yes, sir.
Which is exactly what the compensatory code is supposed to do. You use political jujitsu. Now, what is that? That is, you use your opponent's strength against them.
Exactly.
That's exactly what Andy Dufresne did.
Right. That's a good example. You're right.
But he had to take punishment and going along. In fact, he made some mistakes. What was the mistake he made, for one thing? Let's get into that name-calling thing. He called the warden a name. He said, how can you be so obtuse? Now, he did it indirectly, but it was name-calling.
Mm-hmm.
And the warden said, what'd you call me? He said, look, wait a minute. You are my prisoner, and you come in my office and calling me a name? I'll show you what obtuse is. A month in the hole, you know. And then he came back later on and say, are you thinking about this still obtuse thing? Is that still in your mind? You still got a frame of mind where you're going to call me, the warden, obtuse? Okay, I'm going to give you another month to think about it. And slam the door on him again.
Yes.
Gave him an added month. So when Andy Frame got out that time, he said, I know better than that. In other words, you learn from your mistakes.
Yes, sir.
All right? So I'm just trying to give an overall picture of how we approach this thing. So we don't knock President Obama. Oh, President Obama is just a person that I wanted to get up there so he can learn how the office is run. He didn't know how that office was run, and he still doesn't, most likely. I mean, he's still in the learning stage. But if you're in the prison, you have to learn how the warden's office is run. All right? And the best way to do that is what? Get a job in the warden's office. Get
a job in the warden's office. Very good, Mr. Fuller. TalkTainMenRadio.com. We go where you go. Check us out on WCRS-FM 98.3 Wednesdays and Sunday evenings. Blogs and podcasts are available. Download the TalkTainMenRadio.com app to your cell or tablet. That's radio, the way it should be heard. Stay. All righty. Welcome back to TalkTainMenRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can download the TalkTainMenRadio.com app to your cell or tablet. That's radio, the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host of The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTameItRadio.com. If you'd like to get in contact with the show, you can by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7MrBobby@gmail.com. And speaking about that, let me shout out to Tanya, Mirto, Harry, Eric, Earl, and Nas of D.C., whose letters are in the question rotation, and maybe we will have an opportunity to get to them. Special thanks to Brian in Pittsburgh, California, Anita and Larry in Champaign, Illinois, Angela in San Francisco, California, Pamela in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Tom and Kathy, all the way from Paris, France, who listen to the show, and they have sent in donations. And speaking of donations, we would like for you to do that, to send it to the show, because it cost $60 for that additional hour, and the yearly cost is $3,120. And we're moving on to that goal, so let's see what we can do. Send your donations to K&E World Network. That is the letter K and then E, World Network, Post Office Box 6184, Columbus, Ohio 43206. Send in a money order or a check, but no personal checks, and then we will email you your receipt. And again, the purpose is to extend the compensatory concept for and additional hour, making it a 2-hour program. And our goal is to cover 1 year's worth of programming. So, and one more thing. Oh, thank you. But we still have a distance to go. We've upgraded our website, so if you are having problems pulling up the player, try updating your Flash player, and that should solve the problem. That comes from our technician, Fred. He takes care of that. We're speaking with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., the author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, which is white supremacy. And you can get your copy by going to producejustice.com. That is producejustice.com, and all the information you need will come up on the screen. Okay, I said I would get to Tanya, and she asked me to ask you this, Mr. Fuller. Ask Mr. Fuller what I should do if I live with white supremacists as well as funny acting blacks and suspect that the white supremacists are going through my personal items by the look of the arrangement of my belongings. Ask him why they are in low-down conditions like blacks.
Well, for one thing, you can you're in a prison. Always remember that. And just like you're in a prison cell, every now and then they have what they call inspection of prison cells. So you always look at wherever you are. If you are a person of color, look for the white supremacists that just come storming in, turning over your mattresses, going through all your personal belongings, checking you out thoroughly, which means you cannot keep secrets from them. So you always assume that anything that you are doing, or anything that you are thinking about doing, or anything that your routine is, the white supremacists know about it because you're in their prison. The black people don't do anything that the white supremacists are not aware of because we are in their operations. They know where we are. They know where we come and go. They know what we value. They study us very, very well. That's how they become dominant. Whenever you know people very well, you can dominate them when you know them thoroughly. And black people, even though we're around the white supremacists all the time, we are not aware of how they operate, even looking at them and being around them all the time. In the code book, I say they're the most familiar mystery. That's how I identify them. What do I mean by that? Familiar mystery, meaning we're looking at them every day. not all of them are white supremacists, but we are looking at some of them who are. See, maybe most of them are not white supremacists, but the most powerful and the smartest ones are white supremacists. That's why we have white supremacy. But you're looking at them every day, but you still don't understand them, what they do, how they operate, and you're looking at them going through every motion that they go through. They are right they are obvious. They are right in plain sight. But they are so shrewd in the way that they wield their power that even when you're standing there looking at them wield their power, you cannot see how they go about doing it. Why? Because we're not seeing what we're looking at. But see, the more you begin to understand, the more you begin to study details and whatnot, the more you will understand how they operate. And don't think you can hide anything from them, because they're the most mysterious people on earth. And they know how mysteries are concocted. That's why they're, what? You go into a bookstore and you see what? Mystery.
Yes.
And the one thing that they're real good at, and that is being mysterious about murder. That's why they say murder mysteries.
Murder mysteries, wow.
They have millions of books on how to commit murder and make it mysterious, meaning you don't know who did it. And I'd like to interject something while I'm on this subject right now.
All right.
And that is one thing that the code says, the counter-racist code, and this is an absolute. When anybody kills anybody, everybody in the world should know who did it and why, and they should know it right that minute. I'm going to repeat that. When anybody, I don't care if it's boys in the hood or whomever, when anybody kills anybody, everybody in the entire world should know who did it and why. And it comes under the codified expression, along with other things, of stand by your work. That's a cliche.
Okay.
Stand by your work. If you're big enough to kill somebody, to take somebody out of this world, you know, and a lot of people, including black people, think that they're big and bad enough to do that, and that's why black people kill so many of each other. All right? You big and bad enough to do it, you should be big and bad enough to let the whole world know that you did it. Otherwise, you got no business doing it. It ain't nothing bad about you unless you can whip everybody who don't like it when you kill somebody.
All righty.
I mean, we got to get that notion out of our head that it's something bad about us.
Okay, stand by your work. Okay, let's go to the phone lines. You are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question? What is your question? And turn your radio down, too. What is your question, sir?
Is this me?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. On Mr. Fuller's book, The Code, he has a diagram on it. Looks kind of complicated, a black diagram, and it's hard to understand what it is. I like to.
What page is that, sir?
No, on the front of the book.
Oh, okay, the front. Okay.
The cover of the book.
Okay.
It looked like some kind of diagram, complicated diagram. What does it mean?
Okay, Mr. Fuller, on the cover of your book, The United Independent Compensatory.
The old book, the old book, anyhow, the first book he wrote.
Yes. That was designed by someone that Dr. Frances Welsing, may she rest in peace. Dr. Frances Welsing got someone to design that. And she showed it to me and asked me what did I think about it. And I said, well, I hadn't thought about it at all because I hadn't seen it. And but when I glanced at it, I said, I think that's appropriate because it doesn't mean anything. And I have a phrase inside the book that says, nothing has meaning unless it has meaning. If you get what I mean.
Yes,
and so therefore, what am I doing? I'm saying everything starts with a question. The entire universe, what are we here for, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, you start with that. And so that's sort of implying that.
Okay.
And it has a computer-type design on it, meaning if you come to the conclusion that we're here to solve problems, And that's what my entire book is about, that we're here to solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason why we exist. And the biggest problem is the problem of white supremacy.
White supremacy. All right.
But you have to have a code for doing it, because they have a code for doing what they do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, TalkTainMenRadio.com. We go where you go. Download the TalkTainMenRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio, the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host on The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and we're having a potpourri of topics today, good calls. And as a matter of fact, if you'd like to call in, you may. We do have one line open now. You can call by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and let's go to line number 2. You are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller.
Yes, I'm on there.
Yes, you are.
Okay, first I want to say that I appreciate Mr. Fuller's work very much, and I consider myself a student of his. Second, I think that this answer needs to go on the record, because I haven't really heard quite a satisfactory response to it yet, and that is, how does racism, white supremacy, I understand it as a complete global system, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, how does racism, white supremacy, in 2016 manifest itself from a global perspective, particularly where China is concerned? Because I know it's there, but I would like you to speak to how specifically, for someone that may be confused, as to how the global system of racism, white supremacy manifests itself on every area on this planet in regards to China. How are they victims? How are the Chinese victims of racism, white supremacy?
All right, Mr. Fuller?
Well, people have asked me about the people who are called Chinese, because that's a huge population. So the white supremacists apparently, because I don't know exactly how they go about what their plans are on a day-to-day level, but apparently the white supremacists are always in the business of white supremacy. So apparently they have allowed the Chinese, and I say allowed because since they are supreme, that means they allowed it to happen. That the people who call themselves Chinese to industrialize and start building big cities and going into business and spreading products all over the world. The white supremacists have allowed them to do that, because they could have stopped them from doing that, but they allowed them to do that. So I asked myself, why are they allowing them to do this? Because the white supremacists don't do anything that's not going to strengthen white supremacy. That's just the way they operate. Even when it looks like they're doing something that's weakening the system, they're really not. So that's something that still bears watching. But I have concluded that they set them up to knock them down, because that's something else that white supremacists do. They've done a lot of black people like that. They set you up, they give you plenty of money. I mean, they praise you, they put your picture all the way in, and then at a certain point, just to show their power, they're somewhat like the old Roman emperors. They build you up, and then they stand back and say, now let's pull the rug out from under him and her. They got all this money, they got all this fame, they got all this power. Now let's take their money, let's take their fame, let's scandalize them, let's come up with some kind of rumor about they did this and they did that and all like that, and tear them down. I think that that's what they're going to do with all of those billions of Chinese. They're building them up so that they can knock them down, and they can do it by computers. That's what I think they're going to do.
Okay.
They're going to start pushing buttons on the computers that they already got in place and mess up their economy and have them fighting each other by bushel, killing each other, which is what they're real good at doing, because they do it with black people every day. Having us kill each other after we write songs and all like that and make movies.
Okay. All righty. Thank you for your call. Line number 3, you are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.
Yes, good morning. I appreciate both you brothers, and you make my day and week with your show. I had basically 2 questions, and they're kind of related. The first question is, in terms of the white people that don't contribute to white supremacy, which, are the white people that are not supposedly racist. If they're benefiting from the system and they know what's going on, does that make them participants in the system, or are they just innocent bystanders? That's one.
Okay, wait a minute. Let Mr. Fuller answer that one first. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Okay.
Excellent question. The code position, this is rock solid. If a white person on this planet is able to be a white supremacist, he or she probably is one. Underline the word able.
Mm-hmm.
And see, that excludes newborn babies and people like that, and also it even excludes people who used to stand up and say, I'm a white supremacist, I believe in white supremacy, I believe that we should dominate these dark-skinned people because they are nothing but animals anyway. I mean, and I think we are ordained, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that same white person, as he or she gets older, winds up in a wheelchair, not being able to tell one color from another. Now, once you're not able to tell one color from another, you are no longer able to be a white supremacist. Because to be a white supremacist, you have to know your colors. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, you exempt them. But everybody else is a what? Not a white supremacist. Because if you say that, you're going to have to prove it, and you're going to have to prove it by the white supremacists themselves. No one can prove the existence of white supremacy except the white supremacists themselves. Why? That's why they're white supremacists, with the emphasis on supreme. But you can say you what? You suspect that he or she could be one. See what I mean? You never call a white person a white supremacist under any circumstance unless he or she says that he or she is one.
Okay.
And then you can say it. Well, he just said he's one, so so I can say that he's one since he said he's one. But if he says he's not one, I'm not going to say that he's one. But I will say I suspect he could be one.
Okay.
Why? Because we're in a white supremacist system. There's no other system in the world except that.
Okay. What is your second question, sir?
The second question is related to that one. Okay, so it's almost seemed like, we're looking at the 9 areas of activity, and you see a white person who you suspect of being a white supremacist. You don't get to see, usually you don't get to see every aspect of a person's life or their opinions on that. So that almost leads me to believe, is that coded way of just saying that a white person will always, no matter what happens, they might do something in this area, that area, but since you can't see the other areas, you cannot eliminate them from being a suspect. Is that a coded way of looking at it so that you're always on your guard, that even if a white person do some good things, they still in some other areas could be a white supremacist, therefore being a white supremacist at, period.
Okay, Mr.
Absolutely. You got it. You got it. You can always say, in a friendly way. You should say it in a friendly way. If somebody you work with and whatnot, and the person says, you talk about this racism, and this is a white person talking to a black person on a job, and which can happen any day, and probably is happening right now, even as we're talking. And the white person just turns to the black person and say, do you think that Willie, do you think that I'm a white supremacist? And Willie's codified response is supposed to be, well, most likely you could be one. Yeah, I suspect that you are. And if Brian or whatever his name is, or in the case of his male, or if it's female to female and whatnot, well, Helen, I didn't think that you thought that of me. This is a white lady talking to a black lady. In the office and whatnot. You've been thinking that I could be a white supremacist all this time? Say, well, you could be one. Mary, you could be one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a master list of who is or isn't one. And the white supremacists are very skilled at hiding their supremacy, at hiding who they are, of hiding how they think.
Mm-hmm.
They are extremely skilled. I didn't make it that way. That's just the way it is,
just
Mary.
The way it is. All righty.
So I have to suspect that somebody's got to be one because the whole world is dominated by the people who are white supremacists. And I'm a victim of it.
All right.
And so someone who is white has to be a white supremacist. But I don't know who they are. So if you're able to find out who they are, you tell me. You know,
right? All righty. Thank you, caller, for your call and for your interest in listening to the show. She's here, Mr. Fuller, Miss Julia Lynn Walker, the great host of Crossing Culture. She just came in, and hey, you can listen to that show also here on Talktainment Radio every Wednesday right here. And she had that big smile on her face. She's going to talk about the diaspora. Oh man, good one. All right, Galen. Who's on? Number one? Okay. Line number one. You are now on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question?
Yes, I would like to know did Mr. Fuller attend Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's memorial, which was a couple of weeks ago, and if he didn't, why did he not?
Oh, okay. Thank you for your call, Mr. Fuller.
2 reasons. I did not. And 2 reasons. The main one was it wasn't functional for me to do so because of health considerations and all like that. That's one reason I stopped traveling, too, and making talks and whatnot. And the other reason is I would be a distraction. Dr. Welsing's memorial was supposed to be about Dr. Welsing, not Neely Fuller, not anyone else. The United Independent Code says you recognize people for themselves alone, even though they are attached to other people directly, indirectly. Well, everybody's attached to everybody on the planet directly, indirectly. But you don't want to distract in a memorial service when you're in memory of a person. You remember the thing that stands out alone about that person. And the main thing you remember is, what did the person do, and what was the person trying to do? Basically, those 2 things. That's what a memorial service is supposed to be about. Yeah. Otherwise, why have a memorial service?
Absolutely.
And then whatever it is the person was trying to do, that's the main thing. Look at it, study it, evaluate it, and see if you can use anything there that the person was doing to carry on that person's work. Otherwise, why attend the memorial service anyway?
Great answer, Mr. Fuller. Great answer. Listen, Harry, Murto, Eric, and Earl, also Nas from D.C., I am not going to have time to ask your questions via the Gmail. However, you are in the question rotation, so hopefully we can get to those next week. But what we are going to do is what we normally do at the beginning of the program in our remaining time, give Mr. Fuller a chance to address anything that he normally would have led off the show with. Mr. Fuller, the floor is yours for the remaining minutes.
Well, I didn't have anything except just to reiterate that thing about all this killing, because there's a resurgence now out of black people's frustrations with everything.
Yes.
Even though we go around with these signs saying Black Lives Matter, black people still kill each other all over the world by the bushel. And we think we are accomplishing something by doing that. And the record shows we haven't accomplished anything except just stacked up a whole bunch of dead bodies and have a whole bunch of candles and bunny bears and teddy bears and whatever you do on some wire fence, on some vacant lot, and that's a bunch of nonsense, and it's got to stop. So when it's mostly black people on a day-to-day level who kill each other directly, even though the white supremacists kill us by the millions through poison water and all that type of stuff, but this nonsense about black people killing each other about the way you looked at me and all this kind of nonsense, that's got to stop, and the way to stop it is the people who do the killing should be exposed. All this stop snitching. Yeah, well, this is constructive information, mister. This is not snitching. You kill somebody, you stand by your work.
Okay, we got to close it down, but listen, thank you.
Welcome to Crossing Culture.